Psalm 73. Psalm 73. I trust that you've gotten the handouts.
Yes.
Psalm 73. A psalm of Asaph. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. My steps had almost slipped. For I was envious of the arrogant as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no pains in their death. Their body is fat. They are not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like mankind. Therefore, their pride is their necklace. The garment of violence covers them. Their eyes bulge from fatness. The imaginations of their heart run riot. They mock and wickedly speak of oppression. They speak from on high. They have set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue parades through the earth. Therefore, this people return to this place, and waters of abundance are drunk by them. And they say, well, how does God know? And is there knowledge with the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked, and always at ease. They have increased in wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence. For I have been stricken all day long and chastened every morning. If I had said, I will speak thus or in this way, behold, I should have betrayed the generation of thy children. When I pondered to understand this, it was troublesome in my sight until I came into the sanctuary of God, and I perceived their end. Surely thou dost set them in slippery places. Thou dost cast them down to destruction. How they are destroyed in a moment. They are utterly swept away by sudden terrors. Like a dream when one awakes, O Lord, when aroused, thou wilt despise their form. When my heart was embittered, I was pierced within. Then I was senseless and ignorant. I was like a beast before thee. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou hast taken hold of my right hand. With thy counsel, thou wilt guide me, and afterward receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but thee? And besides thee, I desire nothing on earth. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion. For behold, those who are far from thee will perish. Thou hast destroyed all those who are unfaithful to thee. But as for me, the nearness of God is my good. I have made the Lord God my refuge, that I may tell of all your works.
Amen. Amen.
Drawing on the metaphor that the psalmist puts forth, could be Brother Asaph. I want to talk about lessons from a saint who almost spiritually slipped up. Lessons from a saint who almost spiritually slipped up. The language comes straight from the text. This is a wisdom psalm. And in this wisdom psalm, the psalmist offers a personal testimony of his struggle with an age-old problem, the prosperity of the wicked. My Lord. And as he observed these evil men prospering, verse 3, verse 12, he wondered if a godly lifestyle, one in which he was leading, really pays off. Is it really worth it to live a godly lifestyle? I mean, you're looking around, and he says it. He says it in verse 13. Surely in vain I've kept my heart pure.
Right.
He then uses some very pictographic language to describe what he describes in his own words. My feet came close to stumbling, and my steps had almost slipped. Right? That's his words.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when he says that in verse 2, you have to put it in context. he doesn't mean that that he had a bad thought. Like, oh man, I almost slipped. Sometimes when we use that word, like I slipped up or I almost slipped, right? Like we're talking about a train of thought or whatever that we almost went through, or man, almost like you almost caught me slipping. Like in other words, you were on guard and you were on your P's and Q's, but you almost slipped.
Right.
He uses it slightly different. It's similar. He uses it in a similar way. He just uses it in a different stage. For him, it doesn't mean that he didn't have the thought of that his worship and his Christian lifestyle, if I can use that word, was in vain. He did think it. In fact, we know he thought it because he tells us he thought it in verse 13.
Right.
Surely in vain I've kept my pure. So I've kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence. He's looking at the wicked and he's seeing everything that they're doing and everything they're not doing and all of the prosperity that they're getting. And he's wrestling with the thought, well, shoot, what am I doing trying to do all this stuff for me? Surely in vain I've kept my heart pure. Right. So he thinks the thought. So the question is, what is he, when he says I almost slipped, what does he mean by that? Because we would say, possibly by looking at that, by just even the thought, like, well, you did slip. And no, it's not that it's the thought that's the problem, although it could be. But for him, slipping means giving into the thought, succumbing to the thought.
Wow.
It's like, yeah, I had this thought that, what, man, well, shoot, maybe this is in vain. That is one thing. Watch this. It's one thing to think that. It's another thing to succumb to that.
That's right.
Right.
And he's this Psalm 73 is a testimony of him. He said, I almost succumbed to it. I almost slipped up.
Yeah.
That thought is, I thought it, but that thought almost took over my mind where I bought into it and believed it. Where I come to a point where, well, maybe this Christian thing and the way me living and trying to do all this stuff, maybe it's in vain. He says, I almost slipped up.
Just walk out.
I love how relevant and how real and how much.
All right. Yes, it is.
Yeah. With us, right? That's how we talk.
Yeah.
That's how we talk. And he says it. He says, as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. And my steps almost slipped.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's wrestling with two extremes, two sides of the pendulum in two different ways. One is he's wrestling with what he sees going on in the world and then what he believes.
Right.
And then he's wrestling within himself with this thought that he tend to say, what, maybe this thing ain't even, maybe it ain't, this Christian thing ain't really all it's cut out to be, right? It ain't, he's wrestling with that. He's got this thought, but then on the other side, he's wrestling with not succumbing to this thought. And I want to submit to you, it's one thing to have the thought.
Yes.
It's another thing to succumb to it.
That's right. That's right.
Right? It's one thing to say, maybe trying to live this Christian life ain't worth it. It's another thing to succumb to that thought and totally throw the towel in on your Christianity.
Yes, it is.
Right.
That's deep.
It's one thing to say, maybe trying to be committed to my Christian principles as a teenager or as a young adult, as a man or woman of God. Maybe that's just one big pipe dream. Right?
Yeah,
maybe they ain't grounded in reality. It's one thing to think that. It's another thing to succumb to that.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what? The temptation, just as it was for if it's brother Asaph, right, is just as real to us because we see stuff and we see people who don't have our values, who are not committed to this thing. We're not saying we're perfect, but at least we're trying, right?
Right.
We're trying to do it right. And then you see some folks, they ain't even trying.
Right.
And you wrestle with this thing, and this is where he is. when he says almost slipped up spiritually, he's talking about that tension where he could have succumbed to the thought that maybe this thing ain't even worth it.
Right.
Listen, if I can go down your street, it is such a relevant thing because, I mean, you ever thought, well, shoot, ain't nobody else trying to have a godly marriage?
Right.
What I'm trying to do, what I'm doing all this, putting in all this work for, they seem to be fine. They going on vacations, closing houses. No, they just closed on a house.
Right.
No, they on their third. Sister Law said they on their third house. Right? What am I trying to do? Why am I trying to submit? She ain't submitting over there, and she seems happy.
Right.
She seemed happy and joyful. Right, all kind of stuff. Right, and we wrestle with this thing, right? What am I trying to? Why am I trying to love my wife, and and I gotta adjust, and this fool going up beside his wife's head, and she respect him, right? She don't never talk back or nothing.
Hey, Pastor, she called him Lord. I thought I was gonna die.
Right. I mean, you get all of it, and we wrestle with this, and I love this because this is a real song. Like this is where it's got real.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's something that it doesn't matter if you're old, middle-aged, young. Our teenagers wrestle with this. I remember wrestling with this type of perspective in my high school years and growing up in my first early college years, and I'm, ain't nobody else holding out for marriage, right? I got this value, and I got this value system of mine. Ain't nobody, they wilding out, and I'm like, man, what in the world? And you wrestle with this because here's the thing. No, let me give you another context. When Asaph begins to give assessment, he's not talking about the Gentiles. He's not talking about, that work of the Gentiles. They wilding out. He's talking about other Israelites.
Right.
We all supposed to have the same value system, right? We're all supposed to be living by but they are, they're arrogant. They are prideful. They are oppressive, right? That's what he's talking about. And that's when it starts to get real, right? When it's one thing, we already expect the world to be the world.
Right.
But it's been other Christians, other folks who bear the name, other folks who's supposed to pick up the cross just like you. When other Christians, other folks who are in church and all that kind of stuff, and they subsist in carnality, and then you are trying to put in work.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I'm struggling to tithe. These folks, they know the same, and I'm giving, and I'm being sacrificial, and I'm serving, and they know the same Bible that I know.
Yes.
Right? They're supposed to be living by the same values.
Preach, Pastor.
That's what the context. So if don't just think about, why is the world? This is not just the wicked among the world. This is the wicked among Israel.
Yeah.
And he's man, this has messed him up. He later on he says it was bitter. He says bitter in my kidneys. Sometimes we use all cultures have a way of speaking of internal thought, internal feelings by attaching that to the organs. So we attach it to the heart. And sometimes the Bible does too. But this is one of the passages, there's a few times in the passages where kidneys, he says, like we were talking about a broken heart. He says, I had pierced kidneys.
Wow.
That
hurt.
Yeah, right. He was like, no, like, man, this thing is really messing me up. He says, and surely I've kept my heart pure in vain.
Right.
Oh my God. What do you do? What do you do when you start to buy into the thought that this Christianity and my commitment to it may not really pay off. That it didn't seem to be giving dividends. God Almighty, the psalmist is getting real this morning.
Yeah. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Wow.
And the tension starts with recognizing, as you trace the trajectory of thought from the beginning to the end of the psalm, is to realize it's one thing to have that thought. It's almost kind of like, that's just kind of, it could be a natural temptation when you see discontinuity among the Christian community. But to succumb to it, and he says it. He says, my feet almost slipped.
Yeah.
It almost slipped. I almost slipped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's painting, it's a tremendous metaphor of walking this life, right? Because we're supposed to walk this life. See, watch this. On Christ, the solid rock I stand.
Right.
Yes.
All other ground is sinking sand. Right? At the foundation of that confession is that to walk with Christ is to walk on sure footing.
Yeah.
It is to walk on solid ground.
Right.
And for him to say that I'm almost slipped is not only an expression of his weakness, but in the context, it's also maybe an implicit critique of godliness or Yahwehism, right? In the context of he thought it was in vain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So this morning, then, beloved, we have a front row seat
Mm-hmm.
All right.
to the innermost thoughts of a saint that almost slipped up.
Okay.
Let me just stop and parenthetically say this. Sometimes we need to hear that part of the story,
We do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
right? Yeah, we need, I mean, it's great and it is encouraging and it gives us a model when we can look at others and see how they were victorious
Yes.
and see how they were able to navigate that stuff.
That's
And
it.
but there's other times where we need to see, like, you know what? I almost let go.
Uh-huh.
That was me. I was, and so as we begin to dive into this thing, we see how not only did he struggle, but we see how, what are some of the things in some of his theology that he reflected on, and spiritual truths and realities that he reflected on that kept him from completely losing his bearings.
Yes.
So let's dive. The psalmist almost slipped up, first of all, because of what he saw around him.
Right.
Okay.
This comes with a set of presuppositions that we need to bring out. There's some implicit stuff that he's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's implied, and we need to kind of bring it to the forefront.
Okay.
Supposition one is God's system of ethics has some differences from those of the world around us. That's not deep. That's just kind of how it is, right? If God is holy,
Mm-hmm.
and those of us who are going to be his children are to be holy,
That's
then
right.
automatically we'll be different. We're supposed to be different from the world around us. That's a supposition. That's not, we know that already. We know that system.
Amen.
Related to that, I just mentioned it, is that his followers would then mimic him, would apply his system, would not just apply it, watch this, would value it.
Mm.
right? See, it's one thing we can sometimes we can apply stuff and we do it for various different reasons.
Right.
But it's another thing to actually value this system. And that's kind of where the psalmist is. He says, listen, I'm not one of those that was just kind of just doing it. When he talks about, he says his heart being pure, he's not talking about like he thought he was perfect. He's saying there's no mixed, there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no mixed devotion. I'm not like divided in my devotion with your ways.
Right.
It's pure in the sense that I totally bought into it.
Right.
You said we ought to be generous givers. I took you at your word.
Yeah.
You said that we ought to be those who fight for justice for the oppressed. I made that a standard in my home. Right? Right. This is one of the things that Job is in conversation with Rev. We talked about. We did Ecclesiastes, and I talked about conversation with Job and Ecclesiastes. I think that this is a psalm that's a triangulation of those three.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But and the whole thing is with Job, like Job is kind of calling into the book of Job is calling into question some of the traditional wisdom.
Right.
But the thing is, when Job begins to tell his story, what does he say? He says, no, listen, okay, Lord, I go back to, I visited the sick, when somebody was an orphan or they came by my house and they needed food, like I bought into your system.
Right.
Here's the third presupposition that there is. So one is God's system of ethics is different from the world's. Two, that his followers should value the system. Number three is that there is a practical benefit.
Okay.
That there is a practical benefit of following God. That's the presupposition that he has. In other words, that there is a practical advantage of being a Yahweh follower that we have access to that people who are not Yahweh followers do not.
Right.
That makes sense, right? That's logical.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like if I'm gonna, like, okay, if I'm your child, it is logical then for me to assume that in me being your child, in me doing your will, that I would have some advantages as your child that another person who's not wouldn't.
Right. Right.
That's logical. This is the presupposition that these three presuppositions is what he's working on.
Okay.
And the wicked are challenging this presupposition. Watch this. Not only with their lifestyle, but with their language.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So they ain't following, they don't value his system. And we're talking about the wicked of Israel. They're
Right.
not value. They got the same revelation that I have.
Right.
They don't value it. And then watch this. Watch what they say in verse 11. They say stuff like, and they say, well, how does God know? Is there knowledge with the Most High? Like they're taunting.
Yes.
Right.
They have this type of thing. Later on, he says, they speak against the heavens. I don't know what verse that is. Or earlier, verse 9. They have set their mouth against the heavens.
Uh-huh.
Right? So they're challenging this, and then the element is this. So you got these presuppositions, and they're not problematic. These are like just logical presuppositions of being in relationship with God. But then, as what happens is that he's serving, he's doing this, he's valuing God's system, and it's like, it ain't just like, okay, they are enjoying so it's not like that the wicked are not supposed to have no blessings,
Right.
right? Because everybody knows that he reigns on the just and the unjust, right? So it ain't like they supposed to have, it ain't like, it ain't even like the psalmist is like, I'm expecting them not to have anything.
Right.
Right.
The problem is, watch this, watch how he lays it out. Watch these contrasts. There are no pains in their death, verse 4, right? Their body is fat, which contrast means I'm slimming away here.
Right.
They are not in trouble like other people.
Right.
They're not plagued like the rest of mankind. I mean, we going through.
Right.
Right? Their eyes are bulged from fatness. They so right. They cheeks is starting to. They eating so good. Their cheeks are starting to get fat. Right? So that's the problem. It's not so much that like we just don't want the wicked to have anything. It's like, why is it that they have
so much?
The best? They got the best of what you have to offer, so to speak. This is how he's thinking. And I'm slimming away. They ain't got no struggles. They ain't got no pain. They dying peacefully.
Right.
This is the problem. And he describes it. Watch this. It gets deep, y'all. Verse 3, he says, I was envious of the arrogant. We're going to look at this in a minute. We're going to look at a couple options. In what way are they envious of the arrogant? But watch this. And part of it, I think, is connected to this. As I saw in the translation is, this is a good translation, but here's the Hebrew word. When I saw the shalom of the wicked. Right. Shalom. Now see, shalom. When we talk about the peace of God, that's shalom, right? Shalom is the comprehensive. What's the word I'm looking for? It is a that's the word. Thank you, Lord. The comprehensive flourishing. It's a comprehensive flourishing. That's what happens. Shalom is supposed to what you get when you are obedient to the covenant. Right. Okay. Right. That shalom, when your household is doing well. And you got continuity. There's this continuity with what you set out to do and what you're able to do. Yeah. Right. Like shalom, it happens when your desires are in concert with the fruit. Like you set your heart out to do it, and you do it. They didn't talking about just indulging in pleasure and stuff. I'm just generally speaking, you have the things that you have the things that you want and things that you need, right? It's a flourishing. Yes. And you know this because the way he describes it, when he said, listen, their bellies are fat, they deaf, they got, watch this, they got shalom is when you have emotional peace, sociological peace, spiritual peace. Yeah. You are in proper communication and relationship with God. You are not at odds with your neighbor, right? You are, there's this flourishing that you have. And he says, I got envious when I saw the shalom of the wicked. Right. My God, my God, my God. So brings us to a question. What he said he got envious. And envious as to what? What is he envious? Here are the options. Options 1, he's just envious of what they have. He doesn't mind that they have it, he just wants it too. Yeah. Option 2, he's envious that they have something that they shouldn't have, and he should have. In other words, it's something that should be rightfully his and not theirs,
Just that right there.
but they have it, right? So it would be like a child could be legitimately envious of another child because their parent is giving affection to another child who is not their child that they should be receiving as the child of that parent. Right? That would be a legitimate thing of envy.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Right. So yeah, like it's like yeah. Sometimes Sister Law said like grandparents. Sometimes that happens, right? Where grandparents like you never loved on me and embraced me like that. You never told me how you're proud of me or all that stuff. But then all of a sudden you telling how proud you are of my grandkids and stuff like that. Of course, there's a level where you might like accept that, but then there's a level there's a legitimate envy there.
Yes.
Because it's something that I was entitled to that I was rightfully entitled to that I did not get, but it was given to someone else.
That's right.
So the question is, option one is he's envious that they have it. And he's envious of what they have. Like he wants it. He doesn't have it, he just wants it.
Right.
So it's not like, it's like, okay, fine, they can have it too. I just want it. I want it also. Or number two, they're not even supposed to have this. I am supposed to have it. They do have it and I don't.
Yes.
Which one do you think it is? Option one or option two?
Two.
Yeah. Anybody think option one? Option two. No, remember that Sister Law said option two, or maybe that's just how I'm feeling. Yeah, I think it is option two. Now watch this. Because the shalom, they're not supposed to have shalom like that.
No.
If that's the case, if it is option two, then there might be an element where we probably should not be too hard on him saying that he was envious.
Okay.
Because it could be a legitimate envy, but here the other side of that is he might have a premature perspective. Like he might be thinking that God is giving them things that maybe God didn't give them, or maybe like he might be thinking that in other words, just because he says they're enjoying shalom doesn't mean that they're enjoying shalom.
Yeah.
Right? But that's his perspective. So you all can see is that they're getting shalom, and so he's envious because he thinks that they have something that they should not be entitled to that he should.
Right.
And he's not just like making this up. This is Deuteronomy, right? This is the whole book of Deuteronomy. If you obey me, this is all the stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah.
You'll be fruitful and be peace in land and all that kind of stuff. He said, I will see it.
Okay.
I don't see it. so he's envious.
I would be happy because I wish I had.
Right. But watch this. But there's another aspect. So he's looking around them and he almost slipped because of what he sees. The wicked are, watch this, the wicked are prosperous. They are proud, i.e. arrogant. He says it. In verse 10 through 11, they are they're prosperous, proud, and popular. Verse 10 to 11, watch this. Therefore, his people, that's like his entourage, his folks, his cronies, right? The wicked, they return to this place, and waters of abundance are drunk by them, right? So watch this. They get to partake in the fruit of, that's why, in some cases, that's probably why they're around him. They get in some of the aftermath of his prosperity.
Right. As an entourage.
Yeah, he got an entourage, right? And so here's the thing. It's one thing to be prosperous and proud. It's one thing to be prosperous and popular.
Yes.
In fact, that's kind of prosperous and popular kind of go hand in hand, right?
They go together.
Yeah, right. Right. When you prosperous, most of the time you're gonna get popular, right? They said back then you didn't want me. Now I'm hot, you all on me.
Say that again, Pastor.
Right. Back then you didn't want me. Now I'm hot, you all on me, right? That's one of the Young Jeezy or something, one of them rappers, right? Young Jock or somebody. But the thing is, right, so that kind of goes together. Prosperity and popularity goes together.
Right.
But it's one thing to be prosperous and popular, but when you prosperous and arrogant, prosperous and proud,
Right.
and you still popular, come on, man.
It's too much.
Come on. You know what? And it says something. It says something because, and that's just as we start to think about the world, that's sometimes that's the issue, right? Okay, prosperity and popularity, okay, fine. But you're so arrogant, you're egotistical.
Yeah.
And you still, and it shows you too, though, where people's hearts are, because, and Rev Johnson talked about this a couple of times but most recently I remember when he was talking about when people are wealthy, we start to think that they're wise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. That says something about us.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Just automatically becoming wealthy, all of a sudden now I need to listen to you. You know what you're doing.
Right.
Right.
So it's why Donald Trump got elected.
Yeah.
We just thought, even though that he had something like, well, I don't know, over 7 bankruptcies and failed businesses, right? And all this kind of stuff would say that you maybe don't have as much business savvy as you think you do, or that others think you do, right? But it's this idea because you got money.
Yeah.
You smart.
Also, you're smart, you're wise, you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it says something about, and this is one of the issues he's wrestling with. He's like they following him. He's got an entourage and all this stuff. And which brings me to the question that I kind of already answered. But why do we tolerate arrogance from prosperous people? Part of it is because of what I just mentioned,
Right.
about how we think of wealth. But is there anything else? Why do we tolerate arrogance? Kanye getting ready to put out a thing, another album, supposed to came out in May, didn't come out. Came down. He had a thing at the Mercedes thing in Atlanta, the Mercedes Coliseum or whatever.
Yeah.
Mercedes Stadium, had a watching party, and folks paid all this money, filled out the whole stadium. They have a party, still ain't ready. And they said, well, maybe that's part of the point. That's what they were saying.
Wow.
No, maybe this is part of the point. It's like, maybe this is part of the genius of him, because this is about his mama, Donna. The thing is about Donna, and he's trying to like wrestle with, coming out and accepting his death. So now he's like some savant, right?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Right? I'm just saying, why do we do that? Why do we tolerate arrogance and tolerate this stuff from people who are prosperous that we wouldn't tolerate in any other context? Why do we do that? Why do people do that?
You hope that somebody's prosperity will follow you.
Yes, as I'll say, you try to, we call it living vicariously through people, right? Like she said, you hope that some of their prosperity would fall on you. And I said, we call that living vicariously through people. You see that?
Sometimes it does. You get into certain places because of it. You think about like trophy wives, because of who your husband is, you get to get into certain places that you wouldn't be able to get into if you were by yourself.
Right. And she said, sometimes it does. And in the text, right? The prosperous, they come and then they drink the well. So they do get some of the benefits, right? So yes, so sometimes we do, it happens, and we see how, being around certain people, you get to benefit from it, right? You eating steak with them, you turning up at the bars too. If he at the, you in the club and whatever, you get, they say they popping bottles, you didn't pay for the bottle, but you get to drink some of the bottle. All right. Yeah. So yeah, it happens. And I do think, and which again, it gets back to an issue.
Yeah.
where shalom does encompass all of this stuff, right? It doesn't in the sense of, not that you're going to be rich, but that there's a sense of your needs are taken care of. Socially, you are in harmony with people. Spiritually, God is, I mean, this is not made up. This is why some of those health and wealth preachers are able to manipulate it, because it is there right? When Joseph, what happens? It says, and God was with Joseph in everything that he set out to do, everything that his hands touched prospered.
Right.
Right? So it is, you do have this element. What, Abraham ain't just the father of many nations, but he got bukus of money.
Right.
Yeah.
Hundreds and thousands of sheep. Job ain't just a righteous man, he's the richest man in all of whatever, right? So like this stuff is, so there is this connection. Well, even if it doesn't always mean that everybody's going to be wealthy and all that kind of stuff, which is part of the problem with the health and wealth folks. There's a level of, okay, you can be dealing with abundance, or you definitely ain't dealing with the test of too little.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You ain't, no, right? And so yeah, I think we know what it says. Sometimes we have to. Here's my point. Here's my point. The wicked sometimes are those who are prosperous and are wicked are oftentimes that because we tolerate it among them.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they continue.
We tolerate it. We let them get away with that stuff. They have this is where he's tripping on when he says that they're prosperous, they are popular, but they're also proud.
Yeah.
He's wrestling with the fact that you got people, even got people following them, and that's part of that's something that we need to be careful about. And guess what? He's even tempted to go that route.
Right.
Yeah.
He's got these values. He's saying, you know what? Forget it. Well, shoot, let me join the party too. Come on, Sister Stem. I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. When you asked the question, that sometimes could it be that we're looking for somebody to follow, and an arrogant person has such a big personality.
Yeah.
We can just go ahead and nestle in behind there, and like you said, get the benefits, and
Yep.
so we tolerate that. I mean, it's not
Absolutely.
necessarily that we like it, but we tolerate it because
We tolerate it. Yep.
looking for
Absolutely.
something to follow.
Absolutely. And you listen, and to that point, you tolerate it. You say not because we don't like it. It's not necessarily that we like it, but we tolerate it, and we tolerate it because it's going to give advantages to us. Let me talk about this. This is quintessential Trumpism.
Yeah.
Right? So he came in talking gaslighting, racism, provoking, even promoting, like all this kind of like stirring up the pot when it came to racism, classism, xenophobia, like the worst about us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because he had a whole bunch of money, and because he was, there's books, Jesus and John Wayne. It's a book just came out talking about why a critique of why they thought, commentary on why they thought the folks, white evangelicals voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And the whole premise of the book is to talk about they loved his bravado. He came in and he commanded attention, and he all this conversation about political correctness, he just threw it out the table. He didn't care. And they benefited from it, right? So now when President Obama was in office, we gotta watch, oh my God, we gotta watch out the blacks. Oh, the blacks are talking about racism, and then you got LGBTQ and everything. You can't say anything these days. Gee whiz. Oh my gosh, you gotta, all this, right? Racial reconciliation and all this, right? And you gotta watch your mouth about everything.
Right.
And then he comes in and he starts, I don't care. He doesn't, and they loved it because it gave them some advantages. And it says something about us as people, right? That we have this proclivity to want to use sinful things when it benefits us.
Right.
That's right.
When if it's going to benefit us, well, shoot, hey. Which tells us, which just reveals something. How much do you really value it?
Mm.
Do you really see it as the way that God see it? And this is what he's saying. I had pure in heart. I wasn't following them. I wasn't trying to do that. But maybe I had it in all wrong. This is what he's struggling with.
Pastor,
Yep.
these people that are following the arrogance and the prosperous, don't they have the same mindset that they have? Because, for instance, with Trump, his followers had the same mindset that he had. I on the other hand, don't have that, so I wouldn't have followed him.
Yeah, which I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? So there's these two tensions, and I think they're both equally true. What you said and what Sister Stimley said, and I think it's equally true. On one level, like Sister Stimley said, we don't, and not that I don't like it, but it benefits me. I think there's an element where we recognize, okay, some stuff is inappropriate. But then on the other end, Sister Young, I think you're absolutely correct. It also speaks to the fact that you can gravitate towards it means you value it. And if you value it, probably means you're probably a lot more in tune with that or in agreement with that than you want to confess. Absolutely. And so in that regard, Trump didn't start anything. He only revealed what was already there.
It was already there. Right.
Yeah. But watch this. But then you see then how that can create these issues, and even in folks defecting from the church and defecting when you had Christians who are like, well, forget it. Why are we trying to do all these and practice what the Lord say and forgive? These Christians over here, and why are we trying to vote our Christian conscience and all this kind of stuff and do this stuff? Because these Christians over here, they all about power. Right? You can see how people almost can slip up with that. Yeah. Watch this. Okay, so I'm almost done.
Great illustration. Great illustration.
He slipped up because of what he saw around him. He almost slipped up because of what he saw around him. Then, where am I? Let's lost my place. Then he almost slipped up because, he almost slipped up from what he saw around him, and then it begins to transition from what kept him from slipping up.
Okay.
Verse 15 is a huge one. This is huge. This is the beginning of what kept him from slipping up. There's a couple things. Watch this. He said, verse 13, surely in vain I kept my heart pure, washed my hands in innocence, for I had been stricken all day long and chastened every morning. I was going through, right?
Right.
And he says, verse 15, if I had said this, if I really talked about and told folks, the other believers, what I was going through, he says, behold, I would have betrayed the generation of thy children. What is he getting at? There's a contrast. He says, even though I fought this stuff, I kept silent. I didn't publicize it. He said, if I would have spoke it, if I would have said it, right, I would have betrayed the generation of your children.
Right.
He says, I didn't speak up. I kept it to myself, even though I was thinking this way. Which is contrast in verse 9, when it says, they set their mouth against the heavens, their tongue raved through the earth. What are they saying? What's God don't know? God don't care. He ain't really interested. He ain't gonna do nothing. Like they're speaking wickedly and publicly, parading it through the earth. And he says, I kept it to myself, which is also part of his pain. It's part of his pain in the sense that watch this. Why did he keep it to himself? Because he didn't want to betray God's children. This is huge, y'all. This is huge. What is he saying? He's saying that if it had not been for him thinking as a collective identity in a corporate communal accountability, he would have slipped up. In other words, watch this. He didn't want other people to be negatively spiritually affected by what he was struggling with.
Right.
He was thinking about the spiritual health. He didn't want, and this is what also makes you think that he's a leader. He said, I'm struggling with this stuff. And if I start publicizing this and speaking on this among the congregation, it could make them start get swept away in this too.
Right.
And so he says, and so here's the point. Here's the point. The point is he watched his mouth as in contrast to the wicked, who's saying all type of obscene things, but it was him thinking about the faith in the spiritual being in spiritual solidarity with the community. If I can say it this way, it wasn't his private moments that kept him from slipping. It was his communal public moments that kept him from slipping. Are y'all seeing me here?
Yes.
Amen.
Listen, see what I'm trying to say. See, sometimes we on this path and we almost on this path to slip up and we get by ourselves.
Right.
But see, when you get by yourself, there ain't no accountability to what you believe and what you say.
That's right.
You can believe anything you want to believe by yourself.
Right.
And say it again, Sister Laws.
There's an amen corner.
And she said, there's an amen corner for it. You say what you say. See, watch this. When you start thinking all this crazy stuff, you know what? These most of the time. Let me come down some streets, y'all. Come on. Listen. Most of the time, when we have diverted from the will of God, when we know is not biblically what us to do, we've got alone and they start having a conversation with ourselves, and we made sure that it was a private conversation so that nobody can thwart our plans.
Quit telling on me.
Yeah, you didn't run it past nobody. You didn't call one of the sisters and say, hey, I need you to pray. I'm thinking about this. I need you to pray. No, you didn't do that.
Right. Right.
Because you didn't want to hear what they had to say.
Right.
You know that in the public communal identity, there's accountability.
Right.
You can't just believe. See, so you start talking to other Christians and you talking to the deacon and you talking to the pastor about it. They're gonna come start talking about what the Bible say.
Right. Yeah, I ain't want to hear that.
Anybody try to hear that right now?
Right. Hey, Pastor.
Yeah.
I call that going upstairs up here without adult supervision.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's what he was doing. I mean, that's the temptation to do. I don't want nobody to know because I don't want no adult supervision.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And listen, there are things that we've done. We know that this, if I make this decision, that this is not conducive to what God says I'm supposed to do in a marriage.
Right.
Or if I do this, I know this ain't what I'm supposed to do with my body. Right. Or whatever. Or do this, right? Or do with my money.
Right.
Right. And so there's a level of corporate accountability. Listen, don't underestimate the power of God to keep you from slipping as being expressed through the community.
Right.
There's some stuff we would have slipped up into if it had not been for the community.
Right.
Folks,
Yeah.
man, listen, folks are, we this whole, just me and Jesus Christianity is satanic.
Mhm.
This, I don't need the church. I just me, you do need the church.
Mhm.
There's some stuff. Listen. There are some people who would have gotten divorced if it had not been for them coming to the church
Yes.
and hearing a word from God,
Yeah.
or coming to the church and being able to have conversation with other believers and have them pray for them. They would have been on left. There are some stuff. Listen, there are some. Listen, I think I used to remember the number. Now I forgot, but I think it's one time I came across a thing that said, I don't know, it was 15 seconds or 20 seconds. It says something like, every person has 15 seconds of insanity a day. I think it's 15 seconds.
I
Maybe
can believe it.
it might be a little bit more. It might be a little bit more. I can't remember the number, but there's a period where we have of insanity.
Yes.
Mhm.
And here's the thing: the more you are isolated, the more you might actually act on that insanity.
Yeah.
And what do we mean by insanity? Insanity means you adopt a worldview that is totally contradictory to what you value and what you ascribe to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you examples. So, like, for example, like something like perhaps a husband is, he's a godly husband, he's a gentle giant, he's whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And he having arguments with his wife, and he have this thing, this temporal lips of insanity, or vice versa. We say, I ought to tie you up and put you in the back of the trunk somewhere, do some stuff, right? You just keep on talking, and you mean it, but it's a temporary lapse, or you say, wife, you saying, what? I can't wait till you go to sleep because I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna boil some grits, and like you really mean it,
Right.
like you have that 15 seconds where like you are really. It's the same thing. It happens. This is why, like with criminal cases, it ain't like people didn't like. They're not aware. Like it's not like they're aware. They didn't know that what they're doing when they go and kill somebody and different stuff, and they had a lapse of insanity, right?
Yeah.
And they argue. Is that at that moment you just kind of it's like an out of body experience.
It calls temporarily insane.
It's called temporary insanity.
Yeah.
So, and there's different examples. Sister Laws, do you want to say something?
I would say that probably while a lot of people had a lot of therapy while we were in COVID, there was so much, you don't see as many advertisements about just call somebody right now.
Yeah.
And because you're sitting there by yourself
Yeah.
the entire time and just having self-talk with people that are, some people got closer when they were with people, but people that had to sit by themselves and single people, it was such a big push for therapy. And
Yeah.
such a big push for, let me call somebody, talk to somebody type of thing.
Right. Sister Laws said that's why during the pandemic, there was probably so much push for therapy. If people who by themselves, call somebody, because we have this insanity, right? We got these thoughts. The more you are isolated, the more you're likely to act on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes that's the thing, right? Is when you talk about what's that, when women after birth, they have the depression after birth. The postpartum, right? And it's like that. In any other time, that mother would never do anything harm to their child. But you had a temporary lapse of insanity, and ain't nobody there to help you in that.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Same thing happens spiritually. There's so much that we underestimate that if it had not been for you coming to, and this leads me to the other part, it was not only just his value of the community, but it's when he began, it was the value of it was not only the value of the saints, it was the value of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
He says it explicitly. He says it explicitly. Watch this. He says, verse 16, when I pondered to understand this, it was troublesome in my sight. All this stuff we just talked about until I came into the sanctuary of God. See, the sanctuary is a place that allowed him to see some things clearly.
Right.
Mhm.
When he saw those stuff around him, woo, and he was comparing, and listen, it wasn't like he was under illusion or something.
Right.
No, it was oppression. They were prospering and all this other stuff, but there was some stuff being exaggerated. He saw what he saw, but he didn't see what he didn't see. He said, what do you mean by that? There was some stuff that God was doing that he didn't see. Until he came to the sanctuary, he began to see clearly. Real quickly, as I begin to close out, here's some things that he begins to see clearly as he came into the sanctuary. And what he means by that probably is that he probably had an encounter with God, either likely a revelation or a word spoken by the priest, an oracle given or something like that. But there was a word, there was a revelation given to him when he came into the sanctuary.
Right.
Yes.
And let me just say this, don't underestimate. That's why us meeting together, having a Bible study, it's something about that coming together that God gives a word for the congregation, right? There's something about, there's songs and all this kind of stuff, whatever this, we start to see things clearly.
Yeah.
And left to ourselves, we started thinking what we see is the only way to see it.
Yeah.
And by the time we finish turning that thing over by ourselves, we done almost slipped up if we haven't already. Couple things real quickly. He gained insight on the judgment of the wicked. Which they incurred on themselves. He says, verse 17, I came to the section, then I perceived therein.
Oh yeah.
Surely thou dost set them in slippery places, which is in contrast to him slipping up. Thou dost cast them in down destruction. This is not talking about future judgment in the eschaton or when they get to heaven or an afterlife. He's talking about destruction in this world. It's why he contrasts it with their slippery places with him almost slipping up.
Yeah.
So the Lord begins to see, he says, how they are destroyed in a moment. What else sometimes that moment is as soon as that wealth is gone. Right? So we see how their life is, they start committing suicide and all that kind of other stuff and whatever. Sometimes it's that, but there's other things too. Whatever it is, he says, I saw it. I saw their end. I realized that I was only seeing a piece of the puzzle. He said another thing that he saw clearly when he was in the sanctuary. Not only the wicked, he saw himself a little bit more clearly. He says, verse 20, like a dream when one awakes, O Lord, when aroused, that will despise their form. Then he says, when my heart was embittered, I was pierced within. Then I was senseless and ignorant. He saw himself a little bit different. He saw, man, you know what? I had, there was some stuff that was true, but there was some stuff. I was a person of no sense and ignorant. Just like an animal before you, like somebody who didn't have an animal that didn't have a reason or something. Saw himself a little bit more clearly. He says also, verse 21, when my heart was embittered, I was pierced within. That's what he saw. It was bitterness that was affecting his perspective.
Yes.
And that's something, that's when he says it pierced in my kidney. That's the thing is too, is that sometimes I saw somebody say it on Facebook. I said, this is so true. They said, watch this. They said, you tell the story different when you've healed. Did y'all get that?
Yeah.
He says, in other words, when you ain't hurt no more, you tell the story different.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you hurt, that that mofo, that's a new word. That's the euphemism for it. That's the euphemism. That mofo, When you hurt, whoa,
Right.
they this and that, they wouldn't know good. They didn't never do this. But when you heal, you tell the story different.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what he realized. It was some hurt. And part of the hurt was he felt like, Lord, that's what I'm supposed to be getting. Right? That's what I'm but then watch this. Watch what he sees. He saw when he gets in the sanctuary, he saw the protective presence of God. Verse 23. This is very important. 23, he says, nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou hast taken hold of my right hand. With thy counsel, then he gets into the providential perspective of God. With thy counsel, thou will guide me, and after receiving the glory. Watch this. Here's what he was saying. I was senseless. I was ignorant. I was bitter. But I realized you were still with me. You were the one taking a hold of my right hand. Verse 23. What is he saying here? Even though I was bitter, even though I was thinking that way, I almost slipped up. I realized I didn't slip up because you were right there holding me.
Oh, yeah.
Now watch this. To appreciate that, to appreciate what he's saying there, we have to ask this question, and this is how I'm going to end. God holding him is what prevented him from slipping up.
Right.
To appreciate that, we have to ask the question, what would have been the result of him slipping up? What would have happened if he slipped up?
My God.
Watch this.
Everybody in the congregation would have been affected. That seemed to have been his concern.
Yep.
About
Watch this. You're right. You're going down the right track. Everybody in the congregation would have been affected. And then what else? What would have been the result of that?
He would have been lost.
Okay, yeah. Okay, but watch this. Now, he would have brought the wrath of God up on him.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, listen. Right now, he just some stuff or whatever. So now he would have been one of those who sinned against God and God's people, which would have made that God would have to chastise him, not the wrath of God, but God would have to chastise him. Here's the point. He didn't know. He said he worried about slipping up, but it was God that kept him from slipping up. Because if he would have slipped up, that means God would have had to whoop his butt.
Yeah.
And so in order to prevent him from getting his butt whooped, God protected him and guided him.
Right. God protected him from himself.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
From himself.
God says, listen, you know what? Because
That's love. Yeah.
yeah, you know what? It's a couple times. I remember one time I was watch this. I get as an illustration. It was a time I was really I got all this stuff going on. I was stressed out with different things. I'm trying to get some work done. And the boys are upstairs playing, horse playing, doing jumping off the beds, doing all kind of stuff, which we don't allow. And I've told them a couple of times, sit down, stop. Then what they didn't realize was what looked like was me withholding or not punishing them was actually grace. I sent them to bed. Why was that a grace thing? Because by sending them to bed, I was protecting them from me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because one more time, right? One more time would have meant that you were going to go to bed, but you're going to go to bed with your butt being whooped.
Yeah.
So it looked like, on one level, it looked like, okay, God, like I'm getting the short end, but was really grace. And this is what the psalmist said. He says, I realized some stuff. I was senseless. I was bitter. I could have affected the people of God, and you were with me the whole time, holding my hand, keeping me from slipping.
Yes.
You were protecting me from yourself.
Mhm.
And sometimes we don't know that the grace of God is, we thinking, why he ain't letting this, why does all this kind of stuff. Sometimes, watch this, it ain't because we didn't slip up because we had it all together. It's because he put all the right things around us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
He had that sister to call you just at a moment when you was thinking about doing something.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, Pastor call you, Pastor Johnson call you up. I was just thinking about you. I just want to pray for you. And because it ain't because you were on the right track, but he kept it. God kept you.
Yeah.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, say that. What's it?
Most let it go.
Almost let it go.
Mhm. Felt like
Felt like couldn't take life anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Depression had me down.
Mm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
But God held me close,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
so I
Amen.
wouldn't let go.
Oh, yeah.
God's mercy kept me. Yes, sir. Hey.
So
I wouldn't let
go.
Wouldn't
Oh,
let-
yes.
Hey.
Reverend, that's the kind of love that make you forgive other people.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Amen.
God's mercy kept me,
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't let go.
so I wouldn't let
Oh,
go.
yes.
Wouldn't let go.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
let go.
I almost slipped up, but his mercy,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
yes, sir, kept me.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Amen.
So I wouldn't let go.
Right.
All right, y'all. Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Oh, yes.
I would have. He said I almost slipped up.
Mm.
Almost.
Almost slipped up.
Mhm.
But you were there with me, holding my right hand.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Jesus.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
Lord.
Oh.
Thank you, Jesus.